Hello and welcome to this episode of Futures, the podcast series brought to you by CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply.
Hello everybody and welcome to another one of our CIPS Futures podcasts, and I'm thrilled. Today's podcast promises to be fabulous because not only have I a co-host today in Kate Tomlinson, and hello Kate, our product and governance director at CIPS, who's been very focused on the development of AI within CIPS. We're in the middle of the great conversation and many of you will have contributed. We have literally had tens of thousands of people involved in this brilliant conversation. And if you hadn't had a chance to contribute, please don't hold back. We'd love to hear from as many people as possible. We've got views across all possible issues within the procurement profession and beyond, actually. So fabulous. Thank you so much. So the great conversation goes on, and we couldn't have a great conversation without a friend of mine, a friend of CIPS, and one of the great minds in procurement, Elouise Epstein. So I'm so excited to have Elouise with us. A year or so ago, maybe longer, I'd just become the CEO of CIPS, and Elouise and I started the conversation, and I realized how far-sighted Elouise is, how well-informed she is about what's happening in the world of procurement, particularly around all matters relating to artificial intelligence. And so I'm really, really, really thrilled that she's here to join us today. And so massive welcome to Elouise, one of the world's preeminent thinkers in artificial intelligence. You're hugely welcome. And you're joining us from Las Vegas today. So fabulous.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a kind introduction.
Kate and I have been talking a lot about it, and I've reached a conclusion quite rapidly. I think probably we did some time ago, about what an exciting opportunity this presents to us all in the sort of evolution of AI around the world. What excites you about it, and what are you seeing?
Well, I'm a historian by training and by my spare time. And I just think about how far we've come. When you say that, it's the first thing I go back to is, oh my God, when I started my career, we're still sending paper RFPs. And there were still fax machines taking in RFPs. And that was such a slow, methodical, reactive way. And I'm actually in awe just of dumb luck of being to watch that whole evolution has happened in my career. Like I'm grateful for that, because to see trading and margin improvement in real time and sort of forward looking, I mean, it's just, I'm almost speechless, which is as this conversation goes on, you'll find I'm rarely speechless, but just seeing how far we've come, it's wild.
I feel fortunate in this job. I see this firsthand, but I see all the other things going on that make what we do so relevant to the success of nations and organizations. It's such an exciting time to be in procurement and being able to get our arms around all of this innovation. Amazing.
Well, I would add that I think, well, if you break a business down into its core components, there's what you produce, there's how you sell it, and there's containing the costs to increase the profitability. Like HR, IT, all those other things are enablers. But I mean, that's the core of a business. You develop something, you sell it, and you essentially, you manage your costs to improve your profitability. Like, I don't care how much AI comes into the world, and there's obviously a lot of it. Like, anybody doing procurement, this is a great career going forward. I think procurement as a function is relatively recent, but I think the power of it and is cannot be understated. And you sort of alluded to it, but I'll sort of expand that supply chains are national security assets. And we're just over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we're coming to terms with that. And a supply chain only runs based on the suppliers and the procurement that, like what you can procure. Because if you can't procure whatever it is, local trucking, warehousing, water, etc., like you're not getting into, let's just say, geopolitical events.
I've been thoroughly immersed in AI over the last few months, and I've had the great pleasure of working with Elouise. Learned an awful lot very, very quickly. And actually, the more you learn, the more you question, because it's, things are changing so quickly, and it's how we actually, what we're looking at today and what's going to happen, and how you try and predict that. I mean, you've talked about the past, Elouise, and about you being a historian. And if you then look forward, can you think about where we might be in terms of procurement and supply chain in 10, 15 years?
Probably not that far out. Only, and I'll say this delicately, I'm not sure where the world will be in 10 to 15 years. Our unwillingness / inability to deal with climate change and our propensity for perpetual wars and so forth. Like I'm not worried about the robot apocalypse. I'm worried about humankind's ability to self-destruct. However, I'll give you sort of a 3 to 5 year view in that I think procurement and more broadly supply chain are going to become just ever more important in companies, especially as you're trying to get that balance between profitability and sales and how you produce your products. The really interesting trend over the last 10 to 15 years, and it goes back even longer, but is the rise of private equity. And all these private equity deals, they hinge on the ability to take cost out and again, drive profitability. So whatever acquiring, whatever PE firm then can sell that asset. And what it tells us is that procurement or driving cost out and improving profitability, like that's a core capability for private equity firms. And I think that serves as a blueprint of just getting better at procurement. We don't call it that, but that's what it is. And I actually, leaving aside critiques of private equity, which again, we'll just leave that to the side for a moment. The fact is now, whether you're part of private equity or not, we can bring those improvements today. Sort of like Ben was talking, is like the tools at our fingertips, to say nothing of AI. I mean, imagine a private equity firm buying an asset and then just driving the cost out with AI. I mean, we are at that moment, and I think it's exciting, and I think it reshapes everything that we've known.
It's a fascinating example of AI, but where does the human focus then in terms of how does the human remain relevant?
Well, I think the human, again, and I'm going to state my bias up front, that I don't believe that AI is, I'm not one of these people that says it's going to take all your jobs, and we're going to go to universal basic income. But it changes everything. And change does not mean fire everybody. It means change the work. And I'll give you a basic example. I'm terrible at Excel. I've been terrible at Excel. And I've worked in a consulting firm for a couple decades now, longer than that, actually. And the firm runs on Excel. You progress, you get promoted based on how good your Excel skills are and how quickly you can get these analyses done and do this in almost real time. Like the people I've seen that can do Excel are just incredibly smart and impressive. And I had an undergrad theater degree, and I have a history degree. So a couple of advanced degrees. So I'm terrible at Excel. And yet with, let's just say, Claude plugin to my Excel, I'm a genius now. I can do anything with data. And it's not that I didn't love data. I love data. It's just I couldn't figure out how to write the formulas or the algorithms to do something with the data or to do a regression analysis. And all of a sudden I just tick, I need a da on this. That's how it changes. And then to answer your question, now I become an orchestrator of my imagination. And that's it. I mean, and so the nature of work. And so I think about my private equity example. If you're going to come in and drive out cost at scale with AI, that's all orchestration. And there's human judgment. And so, there's a lot of skill. So we shouldn't fear this. there's reasons to fear AI. I want to state that clearly. However, it just the evolving nature and change of work, that's what it's going to really drive.
I've been excited by the idea of better jobs in the sense of liberated from administrative jobs in the way you're describing that, Excel is not something we'd have to wrestle with. And this is a question I get asked so much is about entry level jobs. And how do we all gather experience through the friction of joining a job and starting? And, we'll probably all start as AI agent managers now, and it's not going to be the same as human beings in the, in the friction of the experiences that we have built to allow us to have great judgment when we're in more senior positions. So maybe there's not a great answer for this yet, Elouise, but what's your perspective on that?
I actually think this is the biggest challenge, is that these entry-level jobs where you're right, we apprenticed and we learned. It took me a good 15, maybe 18 years to learn business and to learn how business operates. And I can't tell you how painful that learning process was. And part of it had to do with being in consulting and the high pace and high pressure and all of that. However, it was a rough, very rough learning experience. And I don't think I could have gotten it without trying to make a PowerPoint, getting it thrown back in my face 100, 200 times by the partners that were actually trying to help me learn, even though I didn't appreciate it at the time. And now I can see, now that I've gotten older and now I'm coaching others, I now see it as like, oh, I get it now, that I didn't have a narrative arc. I didn't have a point. I was like, like all over the place. And so I think I don't have the answer, but on the flip side, then this is a little bit of a tangent, but the three of us wanted to create the next source to pay software. We pretty much could just quit our jobs and go create this using Claude or Gemini or OpenAI. And so now we're competing with the likes of Coupa and Ariba and whatever. The overhead to do that would be trivial. However, at the same time, a 22-year-old right out of uni or a 25-year-old out of grad school or, out of business school, they can do the same thing. So while they don't have the 10, 15, 20 years of experience, they have the advantage that, well, is what the three of us with, I don't know, however, 75 years of combined experience versus a 25-year-old with some academic experience. I'm not sure what we would create would be measurably better than what the 25-year-old would create. So I think I'm not sure how they get that experience. On the flip side, I'm not sure that it matters or to what degree it matters.
So it's leveling the playing field, really, isn't it?
For sure.
If you were starting your career today, then what would you prioritize?
It's funny. I would still go into theater and I would prioritize storytelling, because the one thing I've learned, and this is kind of more broadly macro, is that the world is full of stories, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. We communicate through storytelling, and I did a private workshop for a friend who's a CPO for their sourcing team, because the sourcing team was doing these great opportunity assessments, lobbing them over to the business, and the business was just like delete. Like they couldn't be bothered to, so they wanted help storytelling, and I am, I spend a lot of time working on my storytelling. And so I helped them. And it was eye-opening for me, because I realized that everybody in that room, there's probably 15 people in that room, everybody had amazing stories to tell. What they were stuck in was following this rote process of, the opportunity is this is what we need to do, and this is the justification. That's like, Nobody's going to, they sent me a couple of them. I was like, this is so awful. So it all comes down to, I'm convinced because of just human nature, it's all about stories. And maybe I'll just add authenticity or authentic stories.
So I've personally been lucky enough to have the great conversation across Arabia, Africa, and the UK and Europe and more to come. We're about a third of the way through it. And the themes are unsurprising. AI comes out pretty much everywhere. But the one thing that definitely does, almost the first thing out of people's mouths, is about values, standards, ethical best practice. It's very interesting. And much around the climate as well, I suppose, typically from the younger generations in the room. So people very wedded to making sure that despite the amazing advances in technology, that at the heart of it is ethical best practice. I've seen so much AI developing so quickly, and I've saw extraordinary things of people going home on a Friday and producing something that could be procurement AI on a Monday, and you think, wow, this is insane. But how do we get to the quality around this sort of product? Because I'm anxious that it's a wild west out there at the moment.
Well, I'm tempted to answer this in two ways. So let's see how this goes. So one of the skills that those of us, a lot of my work focuses on the separation between generations, because I think it's important, because those of us over, let's say 40, which is my target demographic, we grew up at a time without personal computers. So we remember we've lived through the evolution of personal computers, the internet, mobile technology, smartphones, cloud, and now AI. So the skills that we have come up with are much just that required us to develop relationships, much like when Excel came along, that became a driver of success. Being able to build relationships and converse with people became a critical skill. That has changed, of course, and then, of course, critical thinking, the ability to cut through some of all the noise and nonsense. So those skills, those of us who are older, have a lot of those skills because that's what was required as we entered our careers. However, for the younger generations, they're not required to have those skills at the same level. And what's even worse is AI impacts the development of those skills and can send them into retrograde, because if AI is doing all the thinking, you have to work really hard to give it the critical eye. So I think educational systems, they have to do that. So that's one track. The other track is the ethical piece of this. And I'll try to, again, dance around this delicately. And I say this as an American that is perpetuating, let's just say, war across the globe. So I am speaking from a different perspective of this older generation. The only answer they seem to have is war and greed and following a playbook from a different time. I do think younger generations, as they're coming in, they're deciding that this is not for them. And again, I don't want to get into the politics of this. I just want to point out that a lot of what we know about business and what's driving AI will fundamentally change. And I'm not saying for better. It will be different than the way those of us who are older will expect, because the younger generation has different values. They have different experiences with technology. And I like to use this example. There was nothing more embarrassing than watching the United States Congress. This is about 5, maybe 7, 8 years ago. Mark Zuckerberg was testifying in front of Congress. So all these old guys that, were in their 70s, 80s, 90s, he's having to explain to them how Facebook makes money. I mean, and that is just so embarrassing. And so until you get these generational changes, like politicians regulate, at least here in the US, regulating AI or any of this, like they're not prepared. They just don't have the skills.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? I think really the generational thing is so important to this moment in time, because the perspective that leaders seem to have of the world relative to the younger generation is so out of kilter. I'm excited for the evolution of procurement and AI in procurement. So many people said to me, I fell into procurement when I go around the world, literally. I always ask. And I wondered if that's actually the antidote to the prospect of the entry level jobs, because in truth, there aren't that many people in procurement who really are coming in with the entry level jobs at the moment.
Well, but here's the thing. Each and every one of us, we do procurement in our own households every day. You go to buy a car, you go to buy an airline ticket to go visit your parents or take a train or whatever. What are we doing? We're making trade-offs. We're making cost versus time versus convenience versus warranty versus the myriad of other things. Or when we're going to buy petrol or groceries. So we all do procurement, and one of the concerning trends, of course, here in the U.S. is the use of credit and the credit card debt and buy now, pay later things. Well, those are all financial mechanisms that are the core tenets of procurement. Corporate procurement's just at a much bigger scale. So yeah, you're right. Like I fell into procurement and everybody in my generation pretty much fell into it because the programs didn't even exist. And part of my advocacy is to get people to understand that, hey, corporate procurement's just an extension of the myriad of things that we do. And I have to get a new water heater. What am I going to do? I'm going to get 3 bids. Why? I have no idea, but that's just what I've learned over the years prior to being a procurement. But like, that's just what is like passed down from generation to generation. So look around, we all do it. So
yes, it's true. The other thing I think that we fail to do is to excite the future generations about what we do and describe it well enough. I was wondering if we needed to change the name, to rebrand it, because when I think about, managing geopolitical disruption, the advent of AI, climate change and responsibilities with come that, population change, all these things coming that, face the challenges of procurement. We did a survey recently. Turns out the CPOs are increasing the custodian of organizational sustainability obligations and, all those sorts of things. So this is an amazing job that brings all of this together to make a huge contribution. And here we go to schools and go, well, what's procurement? And they're like, oh, I don't know. People say it's buying. I'm thinking, well, to some extent it is, but it's becoming such a big part of an organization. How can we do justice to it in people's minds?
Yeah, but I think that's a branding storytelling thing, because one of my, as my career evolved, it never really occurred to me that executives at I don't know, Ford or GM or, P&G or J&J, that they have a fleet of private aircraft. And when in 2008, when the financial crisis hit and there was all these news articles, how the CEOs were flying their private jets to Washington to ask for bailout money, and just the optics of that. And I've been obsessed ever since of how much do these companies spend on private jets and what does it cost? And more recently, the other thing is security. Like I think Mark Zuckerberg has, and Elon Musk, they have these massive security teams. And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm just like, somewhere in those organizations, a procurement person is negotiating a contract for security services, for private jets. Do you rent them? Do you lease them? I mean, if I'm a procurement person, like, that's amazing. Like, you get to see the whole company operate and understand it in a way that it's hard to wrap your head around. And so you get to do these really interesting things. Or even today, let's just give it something very current. Those of us that procure software licenses, we're all negotiating. Let's just let me rephrase it. You two, I assign you to go negotiate our AI licenses. So you're now going to talk to and run an RFP with OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, or Google. And that's fascinating. How do you license that and pay for that and understand the should cost of these frontier models and whatnot? I mean, as a procurement person, that's amazing. I'd rather be doing that than managing the licenses of, which the IT group has to, I'm going to assign 50 Copilot licenses and 5 Claude licenses. Like, that's IT's job, and that sounds dreadful. I'd rather get into the understanding the market. And so I agree with you in rebranding, but I actually think it's more of the stories we tell about the job.
So one of the things that you touched on, and one of the things I'm excited about, is we're going to get together a group and talk about space, and like the global space agencies coming together to talk about the procurement supply of space capability, and thinking about some of the most exciting things that are going on in the future through that.
It's interesting when you talk to some of these guys that they have the same procurement problems that everybody else has, but just in a very interesting context. We were talking to one of them about sourcing satellites. How do you source satellites? The complexity around it. So it's the same thing they're sourcing, but when you put it into different contexts, it's really fascinating.
Did they have an answer where you get a satellite from, Kate? Did they?
Well, it wasn't Tesco.
Well, I'll go one step further. I was working with a client for a bit that managed procurement for a nuclear facility. And if you think about all the proliferation of nuclear, energy that is projected to come, I don't know, how it all play out. But I think that's fascinating too, because you can't make any award decision without regulatory agency approval, and you have a very constrained supply market. And, again, what can you do? It's not a lot of levers to pull, but again, fascinating to think about what goes into procurement in support of either building or operating a nuclear power plant.
I think your point about storytelling, and I think you're right. That's something that as a profession and CIPS as a professional body, we need to get much better at this, because there's some fascinating stories out there that people can learn from, that people can use in their own lives, and actually it's just really interesting. And I think we need to get much better at sharing that and coming together and being that kind of hub where people share those stories and kind of become central to that, I think.
You can see where people are interested, even in I'm just doing something actually on bananas, weirdly enough, the most popular product in the United Kingdom, the pricing and supply chain of bananas, and how people have been able to basically keep that under control for so long, at about 15p a banana forever and a day. But those are relatable stories, aren't they? But what I'm excited about, both of you've been working together to bring CIPS capability and Elouise's amazing brain and perspective together to create a course on AI.
Absolutely. So some really exciting developments. The aim is to work with Elouise, and Elouise is going to be delivering a series of courses. So we like to have 6 courses altogether, and this is a really exciting opportunity for people to become very confident in terms of AI and how they can use agentic AI within their own life, their work life, their personal life. And we want to make sure that people can do that confidently and do that in the right way. So the 6 modules, which will be sequential, you don't have to take all of them, but obviously if you do, you will become very much a kind of advanced practitioner in AI. And Elouise will be there all the way through, coaching, mentoring, really giving people the skills to do this work, but also being there and supporting them and really giving that kind of personal input into how they should be working. And I think that's really the key differentiator, is that Elouise will be alongside, really helping with this.
This is not some random online learning thing. It's all instructor and coaching led with me at the forefront of that. I want to see how this evolves as well, because every time, and in fact, we if a few weeks go by between us talking, Kate, it feels like the entire thing has changed in the 4 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks because the AI world has changed. And so it's wild that's what I'm here for, because that journey is crazy. And if just this one little snippet is changing so fast, imagine the entire procurement profession, the entire supply chain, or even just businesses in general. So I think it's an exciting time. I'm here for it. I love it.
I'm here for it too. And I remember you and I spoke about this idea like in 2050, where a lot of people talk to me about risk and resilience and optimizing cost, all those sorts of things that we know instinctively. That's, the tensions we live with. Do you remember when we were talking about the Netflix model that would serve you up the choices based on your input and things? That's what I've got in my mind. And that was something you said to me a year or so ago.
Well, I'll go one step further. Think about, let's just pick on sales. The sales organizations have matured because of Salesforce.com, the software. And because in the late 90s, essentially, it was the first to pioneer using cloud to bring structure and organization and visibility to sales organizations. And it's been this juggernaut, and rightly so, because Mark Benioff, the founder, did the right technology applied to the right problem at the right time. Awesome. However, just to sort of take your comment a bit further, Ben, we sit in a time where we can all just make our own CRMs. And I don't need Salesforce. So I've been working on the CRM for my company. It's unique to Elouise because the way I manage clients and interactions and, of course, public speaking events, I want them all integrated. And that's unlike anybody else in the world. So I don't even need to worry about, I'm just building this for me. And I'm doing it in Claude. I just plunk, plunk, plunk. This is what I want. And then Claude goes and does it, and it comes back and it's done. And then I would argue you could do the same thing, and will ultimately do the same thing, maybe not for CRM, but for something else. And Kate, same thing. Not only do we get the recommendation engine, the Netflix of a customized experience, it's now I can just have my own customized app for anything at any time in any place. And that is going to be a fundamental, I'm not saying there's not downsides and there's chaos and complexity and you got to do some architectural things, but the difference between paper to email to cloud-based, databases like Salesforce to now I can just build my own.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's sort of almost back to where we started, but in our lifetime, in our adult lifetime, it's pretty extraordinary where we've come from and now. And I love the idea of thinking about, the world in 2050 in a hopefully or in a positive sense. There's clearly a bit to navigate through to get there, but the technological advances just mind-blowing, aren't they? The possibilities. I love it. I'm excited by this, and some people might think it's quite trivial, but we're about to launch an avatar for the great conversation. So rather than having a feedback form or something you could record, we have a conversation with an avatar. I hope people will interact with that and give their perspective on as another interesting way of reflecting the world we're in, but also getting involved with the conversation. It'll be really interesting to see how people respond to that. I'm slightly testing on the future of learning as well, because organizations like ourselves, we've got probably quite a structured learning pathway. What does that look like in the future? As we're serving up content in a different way, people choose to learn rather differently, and in an always on environment where people might learn in 10 minutes a day or, so really interested in how we get through the future of learning as well.
It's all changed. That's all changed. Fundamentally, my wife is a professor of education, and ever since the pandemic, we are at home a lot more together. And I've just heard these discussions and these philosophical discussions and pedagogical discussions, and it's just oh yeah, this is going to change. And just like I can build my own CRM, I can use AI to teach me in the way that I learn, not the way that some software developer that created a learning management system thinks I should learn. That doesn't work. So yeah, the other thing back to technology is I'm also convinced that we're going back, we're as advanced AI as we are, the world works in cycles. And so we are going to get more analog technology and people wanting to unplug and disconnect and retain their privacy. So I do think it is important to balance all of this AI against the younger generations are buying vinyl records and cassette tapes and CDs as what my projection is that they're protesting against all the subscriptions, like your life entire, like, oh, you own nothing and you subscribe to everything. I think that's, again, the business model underneath this is pushing different behavior and moving more back to analog. And I will say, I'm just going to note this for the record. You can mark the date and time. AI is the last technology I'm adopting, and then I'm out. After AI, people are talking about quantum computing, and I'm like, nope, I'm too old. I just it'll come, it'll do whatever, but no.
Maybe, Elouise, that's exactly the idea that all those congressmen and women had, and they were suddenly faced with Mark Zuckerberg talking about, and they were like, oh Lord, I'd given up worrying about that years ago. Anyway, we better wrap up now. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here this afternoon. It's been a fabulous conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. And also I'm excited about what we're going to do together. We're going to really help the profession progress, give them some guidance, and help everyone get on top of artificial intelligence in procurement. So much appreciated, and very good to see you, Elouise. Hope you have a good rest of the day in Las Vegas. Lucky you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. This was a great conversation. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.